Well, today we were going to present about a group that is essentially unreached. They don't look very different, really, from us. You could be walking down the street and you're not going to recognize anything different about this particular group of people. Demographically, ethnically, they look a lot like the rest of us as Americans in this country. There's a whole lot of diversity among this people group. Some are single, some are married, some divorced, some with kids, some with varying educations. Again, nothing obvious that makes them stand out. Some are scraping the bottom of the barrel, just working hard to survive, and some are doing pretty well. So you look at some of the financial numbers for how they are doing. But here's where things get a little bit different. If we start to look statistically at this particular group, we find that 34% of them meet the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. In fact, their suicide rate is twice the suicide rate of police officers and the public in general, and they are considered to be at a 39% greater risk of suicide than all other professions combined. So the outlook is not good at this.
I was going to say, are you talking? Are you talking about pastors right now, or what?
Could be, but here's the big reveal. Who are we talking about? Well, we're talking about correctional officers, actually. So I want to introduce you to somebody from my church. Her name is Annette. She's married to Gene, and they've got those two dogs. They don't normally bring the dogs to church, though, so that's a good thing. But this is Annette, and she has been a correctional officer. She was for 9 years. She has since retired. And as a correctional officer, in her words, there is very little to no support. She says the government doesn't care, sheriff's office, they don't care. When she started with a group of 12. And in their training, they said that 70% of you will be divorced as corrections officers. And the reality is that out of those 12, she's the only one that is still married, even though that statistically is not how it should end up. That is the reality that a lot of correctional officers are dealing with as they deal with these problems. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting before we even started this class or started talking about correctional officers last spring, she came up to me at church one day and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know about something awesome that happened. The Catholic Church in our area put on a meal for all the corrections officers in our area. They invited us and some other EMS and police, and it was a big deal to her. She said all they did was meal and a nice gift, but the recognition was huge and very significant. So once we started doing this project, I talked to her. I said, "Hey, I remember something about that event. Can you tell me about that?" And she told me about it more. I said, "Well, how often does something like this happen?" And she said, "Once." In all her years of being a correctional officer, really there was very little to no support. So I talked to her more about what other organizations and how is she getting support. She said, really, there isn't anything out there. There's some groups, there's some organizations, but for the most part, in her perspective, all they are interested in really doing is drinking and forgetting about the problems that they deal with as corrections officers. So correctional officers as a whole, their job is getting harder because inmates, there are 41% increase over this 13-year period from 2000, but as far as the COs themselves, it's been a much smaller increase, so there's more work, but the challenge is just as big. So as we mentioned before, suicide rates are up, PTSD, not to mention the injuries at work among 10,000. It's over 500 workplace-related injuries, and a number of these are from the inmates themselves who just do not like the corrections officers or take out their aggression on society or on the prisons on the officers themselves. So there's a decent group. That number has grown a little bit since 2016, but a bit over 400,000 correctional officers working in our country and really not getting a lot of support. Even at home, COs self-report that they feel an inherent sense of shame about what they do. They don't seem to enjoy what they do. You talk to Annette and others, they say, "I spend my whole day and really my whole life in prison." That's not a place anybody really likes to be. And so they're not very proud as a whole of their work, and they really don't have any healthy places to vent or get rid of those problems. These statistics say that officers rarely, if ever, talk to their families about what they do. And the end result is that morale among COs it's really low, leaving a lot of them to feel that the only respite and release they can get is from drinking, which correlates with what Annette said about all the groups are really just drinking groups where people are just trying to drown and forget their sorrows. So the need that we are talking about today, obviously enough here, is that correctionals, they lack healthy support. And so we need to be doing something to help them. You might be asking, so what is being done to help? And that's what Clinton and Maggie are going to be talking about. So I'm going to turn it over to Clinton because he's going to talk about what the government is doing to help corrections officers.
Okay, and I am Clinton Carr. We're going to be talking about what governments are doing to help correctional officers. Starting off, we have what I found out is that the governments vary from state to state as far as what they do for correctional officers. Why do governments need to do something to help correctional officers? As Caleb already stated, they are working in a very stressful environment, very dangerous environment. And because of even with suicide and just the assaults and even death, the government has really seen the need to do more than what they have in the past. One thing I discovered concerning the correctional officers is that to recruit correctional officers has been a very difficult task for the government because of the stressful. So what we have, what governments are doing to help correctional officers is that they are really offering paid vacations. They're offering sick leave and holidays. They are offering comprehensive health insurance and life insurance and accidental death and dismemberment benefits. They're even offering now, if an officer get killed, that they will offer the family again at least 1 year of correctional officers' pay. So the pay will be a full pay for 1 year. And I hope y'all can see my slides.
Can you make it bigger, Clinton?
I can. I just didn't want to block you all out. Okay. All right.
That's good.
What prisons or governments are doing to help correctional officers? Again, it really, the government is really focused on benefits. They're providing like dental insurance, vision insurance, life and disability, hospital insurance. They've been looking at trying to increase the salaries of the correctional officers. Correctional officers, even though they are government employees or state employees, they're at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to pay. And so governments or states are increasing the salaries of the correctional officers. Also, with that comes a probationary increase. So they're giving them more money, but then they're extending the probationary period for them to try to get them to not leave before time, but to actually stay, for a length of time, just in case they find out they don't like it. So what they do is that they will give them like 2.5%, like a bonus toward their salary. And if they stay past the probationary period, then they will get the remaining balance, or sometimes they'll withhold it and just give them the whole 5% after the probationary period has ended. Also, they have the recruiting and retention bonuses, so they're getting creative, innovative by offering retention bonuses to try to recruit people into this stressful environment. They've looked at changing their salary grades to try to make them more in line with other government employees. All right. Also, what the governments are doing for the correctional officers, that they're providing excess annual leave payout, meaning that the correctional officers decide to leave, if they have benefits that she had not to be used, then they will go ahead and pay them those benefits. Also, they offer a 403B tax deferred retirement plan. Also, they have offered them promotional opportunities. This is what the governments are doing, offering them promotional opportunities. And then also they're providing them with a cost of living adjustments where they used to go years and years without any kind of adjustment. Now they're giving them some incentives. Still trying to retain correctional officers, still trying to recruit correctional officers, still trying to boost the morale of the correctional officers. All right, then it said what governments are doing for correctional officers. The government provides correctional officers with some mental health counseling in-house. They can see the psychologists in-house, the psychiatrists in-house, and even the chaplains to a small degree to help them to deal with depression and post-traumatic stress disorder and just any kind of fears or problems that they may have. Also, the government, when an officer, correctional officer, have issues beyond inside the prison, then they would encourage and refer them out to an outside agency. But once they go to the outside agency, it becomes a HIPAA rule or a private healthcare issue. So then the prisons, they don't have access to those records, but they do try to help them in many ways as they can. So the difficulty in hiring and keeping correctional officers has sent overtime costs soaring and has contributed to safety and security issues all over the country. So this is not an isolated problem in one state or in the South or in the West, but it's national, a national problem. It's a crisis. So to help one particular crisis that they had, the government passed an act called the Eric Williams Correctional Officer Protection Act. And this act took approximately 3 years to pass. Eric Williams was a correctional officer in Pennsylvania. He was one correctional officer who had a cell phone, he had some handcuffs, and he had, I think he had, let's see, correctional officer, he had cell phone, handcuffs, and maybe one other thing that really was not anything to protect him. So what ended up happening was he was killed because one man couldn't take care of 125 people. So when he was killed, the legislators got together and bipartisan came to conclude that they passed an Eric Williams Correctional Officer Protection Safety Act, which funds the correctional officer with pepper spray, because before then they did not have any kind of weapon to help them or to protect themselves. All right. Also, the government is also doing other things that the federal law enforcement officers, they was working toward helping the correctional officers to be able to retire after 20 years at the age of 50. This is something that they was not able to retire at the age of 50, and if they did, they were penalized. So the federal government passed a law which allows a correctional officer who works 20 years of service at the age of 50 that they can retire. And when they retire, they can retire with their full benefits. Also, the agency is working to recruit and retain young, physically fit workforce. So in order to do that, this was an incentive that they came up with. And it says, but under the current law, they have to pay a 10% penalty if they withdraw their thrift savings plan before turning 55. So that's another financial plan that they have in place for them. Also, the government is doing to help the correctional officer. In 2018, President Trump signed the First Step Act on December the 20th, 1st, and this particular act is a Prison Reform Act. And this Prison Reform Act helps the correctional officers by helping to reduce the federal prison population. So by reducing the prison population, it helps improve the safety for the officers as well as the inmates and those outside the prison walls. So we can thank President Trump and Congress for passing this First Step Act of prison reform, which has been beneficial and reducing some sentences to help with overcrowding for the correctional officers. And at this time, Maggie will share with us what nonprofits are doing for correctional officers.
It's loading.
Got it.
Okay. All right. Let's see what happens. Okay. So unfortunately, I was not able to find a lot of information when it comes to nonprofit organizations. They are very far and few in between to find them. It took me pretty much a couple weeks to even find a few, which it's, for me, I was a little bit disappointed because that means that unfortunately we do not have many organizations that are fully devoted to correctional officers. So who is assisting correctional officers? My research has shown that there are not many out there. There are very few organizations that are currently assisting correctional officers. But here are the several that we found. The first one is Dismas Ministries. They are a Catholic organization located in Wisconsin. Their primary ministry is to inmates, but they also found the need to reach out to correctional officers because they are the forgotten population when it comes to prisons. I also found Correction Staff Fellowship. This one gave me a little bit more hope because this one is primarily run by correctional officers themselves. So it's from them to them, which gave me some hope that there's something happening out there. Primarily, they do their support via online, but they are starting to grow chapters and they want to become countrywide. So they want a group of fellow correction staff in each prison to start their own fellowship. So what they're doing right now is they're providing correctional officers with daily devotionals, marriage retreats, and a prayer request page that is confidential, and you can just put your prayer request there. This Operation Desert Waters is a really good organization. I did not realize that it was a Christian background, but if one notices their literature is definitely Christian oriented. Their aim is to provide support of physical, psychological and mental nature. They provide, as I mentioned before, literature, personal consultation, seminars, workshops, and they are located in Colorado. The American Chaplains Association is a good start if you want to get your ministry started. The only drawback is that they are a multi-faith background, so they're not going to help necessarily with the gospel, but they are there to provide support both for correctional officers and for inmates as well. This one was one that I just found early last week, I think. Correction Officers for Christ. They are an NYC, a great group. If you check their website, they are a fraternal organization that supports correctional officers. They have monthly meetings right now. They also do hospital visits to injured COs. They have a bereavement ministry, and my favorite thing is that they do share the gospel with correctional officers, and their theme is bold enough to serve God. Their dream is to have a fellowship in every prison as well. My last one is heirs of restraint. This one is actually started by a correctional officer and his wife. They're both correctional officers, and they felt the need in their community in Missouri to have some organization that support them. And the way they do it is spiritually, emotionally, and physical support. They do they contact them via publications, phone calls, emails, prayer requests via the website. And the thing that I also love about this group is that they provide Bibles and study manuals to correction officers, and their goal is to provide one for each correctional officer in the country. It's a very bold move, but they're trusting God to do that. Bibles and manuals cost this ministry $14 a bundle, and they're 100% dependent on donations. So what can we do to help? I know that this is the question of the day. What can we do to help, and what can we do to have this subject being brought to the service? I had an interview with Marvin Jackson, the person that founded Heirs of Restraint, and all he said was, it is really hard to get in to do ministry with correctional officers because of their level of work is so tough for them. They naturally develop a mistrust for people and for the public in general. And so it's really hard to do. You need to have individuals that definitely have a passion for the ministry. That we should start with jails because they are at the local level, easier to connect with sheriff's office. That way you may have some other connections in that area. Also connecting with our area prison chaplains. This sheriff's office should be able to help us with that, to identify who they are, and making connections with them may be a good step as well. Also, as Caleb mentioned, the appreciation ministry, instead of doing it once, we need to do it often. For example, some ideas that Marvin Jackson gave me was to plan a meal, prepare goodie bags, cards, baked goods, and do this on a regular basis, probably monthly. Get to know these guys, get to know their families, get to know them in a personal level. Then once you have an established relationship, then we share the gospel as relationships develop. And the big thing that they do not get enough is recognize them publicly for what they are. They are public service, and they are invested in our safety by keeping those people that need to be incarcerated to be there. So my own personal thoughts about this whole situation. I had a really difficult time finding these organizations. So obviously there's a huge need for this, but we do need to get involved. The church needs to get involved and step up and see what it can do with prisons in our areas. There must be a passion for this ministry though, because like I said before, these guys are not really trusting of people. They think that people have, they know that people think that they are not necessarily good guys involved in this, and they know that people have a bad idea of what their job really looks like, and they feel that, and that is reflected in their marriages, in their family lives, and like Caleb said, the drinking, and it's a miserable existence in many ways. So let us keep correctional officers prayer lists and lift them up in prayer daily. You know, if nothing else, we can just spend 2 seconds a day and say, God, just help these guys. You know, they are in a tough situation there. And if we do feel called, let us get involved in this ministry personally. The Lord will lead us and open up the doors. And hopefully I was able to help you with some leads. The church can also financially assist other organizations currently working with correctional officers. If nothing else, we can get involved financially and donate to organizations that are already doing this tough job. But I think for me, the two things that we can do, anybody can do, is pray for them and donate what God puts in your heart to donate for them. So now I'm going to pass this screen on to Dwight. he's going to make sense of everything with the conclusion, and he's going to let us know a little bit more information. I'm interested in seeing what he's got to say about his own personal organization that he's involved with, Prison Ministries Association, and just pass the word on to you, and I'm going to stop sharing mine, and welcome, Dwight.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. All right. So welcome back, everybody. And again, I want to thank the team for all the good research and information that they got, because what we're thinking about as the director of Prison Mission Association, we want to look at how we could be involved, or maybe other nonprofits and churches, to help make a difference with this amazing need that we've just talked about. Now, who is Prison Mission Association? We're a nonprofit organization. We provide Bible correspondence courses at no cost to inmates all over the country, with the goal of reaching prisoners for Christ, developing godly leadership, and planting churches in prison. Now, how did PMA get started? It was back in 1955. Joe Mason down in Texas developed Bible correspondence courses with the goal of reaching prisoners for Christ. And now I want to share with you a verse about what PMA might be able to do to help with correctional officers. And this really hit me about a year ago. I was in a prayer meeting and a pastor shared this verse from Philippians 1. Paul says, "Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I'm in chains for Christ." So here it struck me, we have an example of the Apostle Paul. While he's in prison, he shared the gospel, not just with the inmates, but he reached the whole palace guard. And so what I'm thinking, it would make sense to me, since we're already going into prisons, that we need to offer some help to correctional officers. And if we can reach the correctional officers, they can help us reach the inmates and improve the prison system. And so the prison culture, which we've already looked at, is very volatile, violent, depressing, discouraging. So there's a great need for somebody to bring hope, encouragement, positive impact, to make a difference in the lives of the correctional officers. So one way that has lowered the violence and the toxic environment is the example of the Supermax prison in Angola, Louisiana. It was once called the bloodiest prison in America, and with over 6,300 inmates who were mostly all serving life sentences, it is now completely transformed. Angola started with the leadership that were committed to teaching moral values, and they invited a Bible college to come and to teach. And they raised up leadership from within to plant churches right within that prison. And it has now changed from one of the bloodiest prisons to one of the safest maximum security prisons. What they did in Angola can be duplicated. In PMA, we're one of the fastest growing prison ministries now in America. We've added over 14,000 new students in the last 4 years in all 50 states. And we have a similar vision to teach inmates through these life-changing Bible correspondence courses, and they can earn college credit as well. So with our goal of planting churches, that can bring hope and positive impact in the culture of the prisons and significantly help the correctional officers. A second way, well, actually, then we want to look at the costs of what that would cost us. My idea is that PMA won't plant the churches. We'll be partnering. We partner with a local church near the prison, and that they would be doing the mentoring, the discipling, and cover the costs of that extension of their local church behind bars. A second suggestion we could do to help is to provide a 12 Seeds for Successful Relationships workshops for the correctional officers, because the quality of a person's relationships reflects the quality of a person's life. And so we want to help them with their lives, we want to help them with their relationships. And these could be arranged with the Department of Corrections as part of the correctional officer's continuing education. And each correctional officer would get a free copy of the book and the workbook. And we've actually done this. The author, Norm Anderson, of the book is a personal friend of mine, and he and I went to Red Wing Prison, and we put on this seminar, and it went over really well. And right now I'm working with the Minnesota Department of Corrections to get this approved, so that this would be something that we could offer to not only the inmates, but to the correctional officers as well. So the cost of this would be subsidized by my friend who is the author, Norm Anderson. He's offered us grants through the National Christian Foundation to fund the resources, the books, and actually for him to teach the workshops as well, which is pretty cool. Now, a third way is we could create a How to Pray for Correctional Officers handout. I've done that for inmates. I have a How to Pray for Inmates handout with Bible verses and everything. I could do that and create one of those. And the cost would be very minimal. We could email it out to chaplains to distribute. We could get inmates to pray for correctional officers. And I think that would be awesome to develop a prayer network with the inmates as I'm visiting them and asking them to pray for the correctional officers. A fourth way was that we could recruit local churches to help to host an appreciation dinner, just like has been mentioned already. And the cost of that would be covered by local churches that would be hosting those appreciation dinners. And the fifth way would be to recruit local churches to help, could make a project to purchase a copy of the book Staying Well, which gives strategies for correctional staff. And chapter 12 in there has the solution, a spiritual solution, which is actually the gospel. It's presented by a correctional officer who came to know the Lord. And he shares his personal testimony in that book. So that could be a project that a local church could do. And the cost of the Bible or a large print, I like to give out large print Bibles are around $4 each for each correctional officer. And then the retail for that Staying Well book is $6.49. But if you bought multiple copies, it could be as cheap as $3.25 for that project. And the Cook County Prison in Illinois, Moody Church donated all these books to the correctional staff. And here's a sample of the sticker that they gave out, and that a church could put a sticker in the book and kind of just to be a blessing and encouragement in that way. A sixth way that I would suggest is that churches could help by purchasing and donating posters for the correctional officers' break room. And these were made and designed by the Desert Waters Correctional Outreach that we've talked about a little bit. And the cost of that for a regular set of 3 11 by 17 would be about $30. And if you got the supersized one, it's about $90. So this could be a very affordable project that a local church could do. The last thing I think here on my list is that I've got is that PMA could create a resource sheet that lists all the nonprofits helping correctional officers and the resources that are available. So here's a sample of the one that I put together now. And this is something that we could print, photocopy off. I could get that distributed from the PMA website at no cost, and we could email it to chaplains to distribute it to the correctional officers in the prison. And I can give them out when I go and visit the prisons. Like a week from now, I'll be in the Stillwater prison. I can give them out to the correctional officers. So the cost for that is pretty minimal, but that information that has been gathered is very, very valuable. So how are we going to accomplish this? We really need to build a prayer network and ask people to have a burden to get involved with this, to really be in prayer and present this presentation. My goal is to edit what we've made here today and put together a presentation that we can show other people so they can become aware of the need of this unreached people group. And then we can distribute the prayer handout for correctional officers. We can distribute the handout for the resources to correctional officers. And we can partner with those other nonprofits that Maggie has found here and work together and collaborate. Because PMA can't do all of this, but there are other groups that are already focusing on this, but we would love to partner with them. And I want to start with local prisons right here in Minnesota and our local churches to do some of these projects, giving away the books, the Bibles, doing the workshops, and appreciation dinners. And so I think by starting there, that would be a really good start that could start to snowball and reach other places. And so we need your prayers and your support and feedback and ideas to really get this going. So just imagine how different our prisons would be if godly correctional officers who are serving in the power of the Holy Spirit and the inmates are planting churches behind bars, and both these groups are praying for each other. I think it would be amazing how God could work. I think God could bring revival to this country, and it could start in the prisons. So I want to thank everybody for your contributions and hard work. Caleb, Clinton, Maggie, and Dr. Sweet here, who is our teacher. Thank you for watching this. And if you want more information, there's my contact information. We would love to partner with you or see how we could work with you and PMA to make a difference in reaching these people with the gospel and the correctional officers and their families. Okay, thank you very much.